Good evening, spiritual warriors. Welcome to Spiritual Warriorship. And I'm Mother and Johnny. And tonight we're continuing with Spiritual Warrior 6 by His Holiness Bhakti-Tirtha Swami. Beyond Fanaticism, Terrorism, and War. Discovering the peace solution, and I'm sure we all would like that. I don't know how many of you are out there, because as I say, I don't see the board, but we have been through 3 chapters so far. The phenomenon of evil, why do we suffer? And what was the other one? The different, what was it? Different conceptions of religion. And I felt Bhakti-Tirtha Swami gave us quite a bit to contemplate and to look at and examine, to help us in our life, in our everyday activities, and especially in our spiritual and religious life. What I wanted to ask whomever's out there, if you're in the chat room or go to the chat room, of those 3 chapters that we covered, was there any one particular word, sentence, concept that you heard that made a difference in your thinking, in your consciousness, and in your everyday life? If so, please put it on in the chat room, and I'd like to hear it later. But we're going to begin tonight. Again, Chapter 6 in Spiritual Warrior 6, the positive and negative effects of war. And this chapter, as I said, goes into some detail about spiritual warriorship, which I'm glad for. I had given it way back, whatever year was, we started this program. And we want to really look and see, are we becoming strong spiritual warriors in this day? So let's see what Bhakti-Tirtha Swami has to say. In the course of daily life, we often find ourselves in unpleasant environments and situations, despite our best endeavors to avoid such circumstances. And I'm sure you'll agree, sometimes we're really positive in our mind as to what we're doing and where we're going and how, and somehow we can end up even in the place where you thought it was really a positive environment, something going on, unpleasant. These situations tend to expose our true quality, okay? If you recall, we've read and studied, and he's usually told us, he continuously, in fact, tells us, it's important to know what's going on inside of us. It's important for us to go inside. And he's saying, if you find yourself, despite your best endeavors, in an unpleasant environment, that exposure tends to expose our true quality. First, let us consider which environments bring out the very worst in people. Among the many circumstances that might materialize in a person's life, such as school, work, family, gatherings, incarceration, funerals, weddings, and so on. Those are all events that we might be in. Consider a setting that elicits the most negative traits within a human. We will find that war has an unusual way of engendering the very worst in people. Now, the next section is entitled Human Nature at its Worst. Through a closer examination of the atrocities that often happen during war, we find that soldiers have the capacity to engage in some of the most vicious crimes. Death no longer has the same meaning, because the fighters see death all around them, and in the most wretched and horrible ways. I think I've even heard that with when we read about and hear about the street gangs, and how some of the young people today will just walk up to somebody and shoot them because of this kind of environment and this kind of situations. So he says that seeing it every day and all around, and in the really most wretched and horrible ways. So they also react viciously for their own self-preservation. History shows that war crimes have not been limited to any particular nationality or to a specific war. Now, before I go further, I told you, if you're able to get this spiritual warrior book, if you're able to get all the spiritual warrior books, because they're full of concepts, ideas that can help you see more clearly and even function better, you can purchase them at Krishna.com store. Okay. Now, I am going to skip pages. Atitirtha Swami gets very explicit about some of the horrible things that go in war. And I choose not to read them. If you care to, please get the book. So that's what he mentions as to human nature at its worst. He then goes to human nature at its best. And he states, not all people respond in negative and vicious ways under pressure. Some individuals have a great level of love. Have you noticed how he always brings back that love aspect? Even in the first chapter, the phenomenon of evil, he told us at the very end of that love can destroy a lot of that evil that's within us and within others. And also, when a spiritual warrior too, School of Love, he told us that we are eternal beings and the soul is made for love. So he continues to remind us of that aspect of ourselves, even though he presents to us what we see with our material eyes. He states, some individuals have a great level of love, compassion, and devotion, which will manifest the most when put to the test. And he's also told us many times, especially if you're on a spiritual path, you're going to be tested. And the test is not to catch you, oh, gotcha. No, it's to see if you're truly serious about being on that path, staying on that path. So when put to the test, what happens? How do you react, respond? He says, therefore, consider which environments bring out the best in people. Actually, when we examine human nature, we will see that some of the same situations that bring out the worst in people will also bring out the very best in other people. War is one of the situations that can also bring out the very best, because difficult situations will expose the true nature of people. Have you ever been somewhere and somebody maybe you've been seeing on a regular basis and maybe formed a good opinion, and something happens, or the system changes, or the code changes, or the supervisor says we're changing, we're going to be doing something different, which may be a little, and you notice that same person, their whole personality, they may start cursing, screaming, hollering, my gosh. So situations can bring out, certain situations can bring out the worst in people, and yet the best. And you may then see somebody else who says, oh, this is great, something new to work on, another opportunity to show what I can do or how I can do this work. But he says that war can bring out the worst or the best. The most amazing qualities can shine forth if they already exist within the person in a dormant condition. The most amazing qualities can shine forth if they already exist within the person in a dormant condition. The more that a situation challenges an individual, the more it will expose what the person really has in their consciousness. It's like, I remember the sentence he uses somewhere, you can't cheat God. And you really can't cheat yourself. You can pretend and pretend, but something will come to expose what's really going on in your consciousness. And what he does now, and I'm not going to go into all the detail, he just names a few people who have expressed this. Florence Nightingale, a famous nurse in the 19th century. She felt a unique calling to dedicate her life to the care of the sick. Now, she was born in a wealthy family in 1820, he tells us. And she went against her family's wishes by pursuing her study in hospital care. Now, here's one, as you see, wealthy family, but she wanted to care for people. And the sicknesses and things brought in. There's a nice story about her. It's a light reading about Florence Nightingale. Another personality he mentions is Harriet Tubman, who, an African American, who exemplifies rare courage and compassion in the face of great dangers. Now, she was born into slavery. She escaped in 1849 and became one of the most successful assistants of the Underground Railroad. Through her efforts, she led more than 300 slaves to freedom, which was not an easy task. She was called the Moses of her people. He then tells us about a father, Maximilian Kolbe. Now, he was a Catholic priest, and he provides an extraordinary example of heroism during the war, World War II. He lived his life in service to God and died that way as well. Survivors of the death camps remember him not only for his death, but his behavior in life as well. So he goes on to say, obviously their compassion was much stronger and they were more selfless. In many cases, they also had a deeper faith in God. So we've talked about that, how important faith is in our lives. And as we have the faith, we begin to know that God is our dearest friend, that He's right within our heart. He's always there. He protects us and cares for us. But it doesn't say we won't go through. Look at Arjun. They were good friends, right? And slept in the same bed. And yet, Arjun had to go to war. And what happened? He showed what may happen. He got a little panicky there. He didn't want to fight. And he had Krishna right next to him. And that's why we have the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna shows him that he has to know the difference between the material and the spiritual. And if the Lord gives you, God gives you an instruction, then you're doing it for Him and not for yourself. So Bhakti Tirtha relates here briefly that some of his own staff people and members risked their lives in Africa, in Liberia and Sierra Leone. They went through quite a bit there during the war. And several were assassinated while trying to facilitate the needs of millions of suffering people. And he was saying, reminds us that in former Yugoslavia, several Hare Krishna devotees risked their lives on a regular basis. So let's look at what he calls spiritual warfare. Now, we're on a spiritual warriorship path, aren't we? So what are we saying? What is spiritual warfare? He tells us that the points we've just covered can help us to realize how war transforms the consciousness of people, nations, and continents. It has an unusual way of honing into different emotions, positive as well as negative. While war dehumanizes some people, it empowers others to go the extra mile and to act far beyond their normal capabilities. The idea he's telling us behind his series of books entitled Spiritual Warrior is to tune into this concept and use it in a positive way. What concept? That war empowers others to go the extra mile and to act far beyond their normal capabilities. Spiritual warriors. Now, some wars create an environment that can bring out the very best in people. We want to help people see their lives as a daily mission. Every day you get up, you have a mission. Adversarial situations and dangers, environments arise in our daily life. But we want to constantly access love in spite of the challenges. And wait, how are you going to... Don't forget, way back we talked about, and he brought to us, that the soul is made for love. And all of us are a spirit soul inside these material bodies. So that's not a far out statement he's making. And that's why the spiritual warrior is telling us these series of spiritual warrior books is to help use it in a positive way. Instead of conventional or traditional warfare, we are engaged in spiritual warfare. The character, weapons, and battlefield of the spiritual warrior are all wholesome and extraordinary. The word war usually carries negative connotations. But realizing that war indicates an emergency will encourage us to develop strategy and clarity about our deeper goals, our spiritual. We must maintain our focus and determination on our deeper goals, on our spiritual studies. All of these qualities can be powerful and positive as we depart from conventional settings. Now, what are the weapons, the battlefield, and the goal of the spiritual warrior? Now, those of you that have been with us for some time, hopefully something comes to your mind. Why don't you, if it does, put it down. What are the weapons, the battlefield, and the goal of the spiritual warrior? If you're fairly new, I'll continue. But I hope some of you have been with us a while. Something clicks and you remember. And again, the whole idea of something clicking, something remembered, you'll see how you've hopefully been able to accept it, imbibe it in your life, practice it in your life, and see a difference. Because we are, as he said before, on a mission here in this material world. So think on it. These weekly readings and sharing, it's for me to grow and understand, and these books are truly helping me. And hopefully for you who are listening and hearing, that you're really hearing, and that it's really striking a chord in your mind and consciousness and heart, because he's taking us to a higher level if you're listening and hearing. So he says the spiritual warrior is unconventional, to say the least. We do not fight with conventional weapons. We do not fight on conventional battlegrounds. And we do not fight for conventional objectives. Okay? Think about it. We're spiritual warriors. You're here. Spiritual warriorship on Krishna.com. Unconventional warfare in a spiritual setting uses weapons of love. Word again. Compassion and fearlessness in order to do the right action in the right way. Devotion, pridelessness, and selflessness lay the foundation for our weapons. Devotion, pridelessness, selflessness lay the foundation for our weapons. And what were those weapons? Oh, everybody's answering at once. You remember, right? What are those weapons? Love, compassion, fearlessness. Now he goes on. If we have that foundation, consequently, we have this tremendous armor and arsenal of very progressive and powerful connections. Second, the spiritual warrior's battlefield is the battlefield of consciousness, or the realm of human consciousness, where we wage war against the ignorance and lust that now pervades human society like an occupying army. Conversely, conventional wars take place in a country, city, or village. And in any of these settings, the material situation focuses on what? Sovereignty or egocentricity. One nation, one group, or one religion in one part of the world is what? Trying to dominate others and capitalize for themselves at the demise of other groups. That's conventional war. Many of the wars in human history have had some religious overtones. But a closer look generally reveals that the combatants were actually more interested in some political or territorial gains. People can use religion for all types of personal motives. At times, our consciousness comes under attack, which helps us realize that the intruding armies of lust, greed, selfishness, avarice, and other negative qualities can overpower our consciousness. That can happen at times, especially if you're not mindful. And he talks about that awareness. We've dealt with that, an alertness of where you are, your association, your conversations, The people, association especially. You have to be very mindful and very strong in your faith and conviction. So finally, we want to consider the actual objective of the spiritual warrior. How to bring about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. the greatest good for the greatest number of people. We want to help people free themselves from slavery of their senses and from the orthodoxy and fads constantly imposed upon us with forces that seem to be blind followers. Now, the objective is to gain freedom from the illusions imposed by the material body, material world, and the material planets, so that we can return to the spiritual realm. How often, if we've been listening to these readings, he keeps reminding us that whole thing, this world is not our home. And we're here to know that, and work our way out of here. And he's been giving us and bringing us quotes from Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada, to help us imbibe that understanding. And what we want is so that we can return to the spiritual realm where we will find ultimate association, peace, oh my, yes, and freedom. So our objective, spiritual warriors out there, our objective is a civilization in which people live in harmony with each other and with God, awakened and in tune with the effulgent spiritual environment available to us. Such spiritual warriors have gone deep into their bona fide religions. So wherever you are, whatever religion, you may not be a Hare Krishna, but what your religion, if you go deep into that bona fide religion, you will be absorbed in experiencing the most universal, confidential, and loving essence of these teachings, because that's what religion is for, to teach us how to love God. And that's our ultimate goal and objective here, is to reach that platform of genuine affection and pure love for God. Toward these ends, we endeavor to develop ourselves. Why? To ensure an understanding with the people we meet. Because if we understand ourselves and develop ourselves at this higher level of consciousness, we will understand people we meet and know that where they are. And as a warrior, we can help them battle those negative aspects. We want to give these people the tools they need to discover and experience the truth for themselves. How do we do that? We've been given tools. We have been through how many spiritual warrior books with so many techniques, technologies to know self and to know God and who we are. He constantly reminds us that we are eternal beings. So it just gives us a little hint here of conventional warfare versus spiritual warfare. Now possibly, if you've been listening, you could even give that yourself. But let's see what he says. The warrior conception is powerful because the thought of war indicates danger. We realize that some alliances are healthy and friendly. Some associations and environments are unhealthy. And there again is when we're mindful and we're out and we go somewhere, we know if that's an unhealthy environment for our consciousness, for our God consciousness, for our spiritual life. And it doesn't mean you go off somewhere and just twiddle your thumbs. You have to be active. The soul is active. But you want it active at a higher level rather than the lower level. And that we saw was mentioned in the first chapter with the phenomenon of evil. How in this age that evil is within us and without, and we have to work on nullifying that. So we must constantly try to distinguish between the two, what's healthy and what's unhealthy. Because in war, we must deal with issues of survival. When conventional fighters, soldiers fight on the battlefield, they have strategies to protect themselves. Particular areas of expertise. And we get that if we've been following these books. We're getting strategies. What was it in Spiritual Warrior 4? Remember when we did managing anger? He had step by step what anger is, how it comes, what to look for, and then how to manage it. I mean, we've been getting it if we've been following with these books. So many anxiety, so many areas we've looked at to help us, and I hope I hope you've been using them and can maybe at some time just share with us how it's helped you, if it has. And if not, try to get the book, because you can't remember everything. And I know you can take notes. Sometimes I take notes and then I put them aside and they don't go back. But if you have the book, you can pick it up and look at it. Yeah, that's the point. I want to work on that. And then maybe you can write that point down and decide, set goals of how you will use that to increase your consciousness and your life activities. So he says, similar warriors see themselves on a mission. Whether we're lawyers, engineers, doctors, teachers, priests, or housewives, we must realize we have a mission. And as we carry out our mission, we must acknowledge that dangers inherently exist, because what? War means danger. At the same time, there are opportunities for victory and for high achievement. Okay, I want to read something. We've been mentioning consciousness, and this next section is called the battlefield of consciousness. But I want to go to Bhagavad Gita. I love going to Bhagavad Gita. Do you love going to Bhagavad Gita? Just a short passage Prabhupada talks about here in the introduction about consciousness. There were two things here. He mentions in the introduction all instructions in the Bhagavad Gita are intended to awaken pure consciousness. And therefore, we find at the last stage of the Gita's instruction that Krishna is asking Arjuna whether he is now in purified consciousness. He says purified consciousness means acting in accordance with the instruction of the Lord. This is the whole sum and substance for purified consciousness. Consciousness is already there. That's who we are. Consciousness. Spirit, soul. And consciousness is already there because we are part and parcel of the Lord. And again, what is that part and parcel? Our spirit, soul. It's right there. Consciousness. But for us, there is the affinity of being affected by the inferior modes. But the Lord, being supreme, is never affected. That's the difference between the Supreme Lord and the small individual soul. So consciousness is already there. And it's how we care for it. And this is what Bhakti Tirtha Swami is sharing with us here. That he says we must realize that we cannot avoid war, since it is an inevitable part of material existence. And as long as people have existed on the planet, wars have been fought, and they will continue to rage. So the greatest battlefield is the battlefield of consciousness, and beneath the consciousness of war is the consciousness that leads to war. The negative mental culture of lust, greed, envy, indecency, and domination. Now, as this negative mental culture prevails, war is inevitable. Now, it pervades human civilization. We find ourselves surrounded by a battlefield of consciousness and an atmosphere of war. So let's look at, he mentions here, the necessity of spiritual warriorship. There's the need, and where there's a need, we can fulfill it, and we're given how to accomplish that. Now, if the lifestyle you want is always escaping your grasp, maybe it's because you haven't yet mastered the art of spiritual warriorship. Haven't mastered the art of spiritual warriorship. In these days and times, the art of spiritual warriorship is essential to those who want to experience personal fulfillment, loving relationships, and overall well-being. In a world that's what? Riddled with negative influences that degrade our consciousness. Spiritual warriorship is no longer a recreation, no longer a sport or a luxury. It is actually a strategy for survival. To imbibe those weapons and put them into practice in your life. Especially, it's a strategy for survival, especially for those who want to avoid toxic thoughts, patterns, and their devastating effects. Remember when we did the 12 qualities, and we dealt with the first quality, which is sense control and mastery of the mind. And it was emphasized we have to be aware of our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. So we have quite a responsibility on it in our spiritual warriorship. But if we take the weapons and use them, so he says a great number of spiritually evolved souls and seekers recognize the need to resist a common pitfall that plagues on many members of the society. Unbridled lust is, of course, foremost among the elements that have a harmful effect upon our success and happiness. Now keep in mind that many of the causes of negative obsessions stem from lust. So purifying methodologies like those found in this book and the other spiritual warrior books are critically important. You all gonna call up Kristen.com tomorrow and get your spiritual warrior books, aren't you? These approaches can profoundly alter the fatal attractions and habitual patterns of self-deceit from which so many people are now suffering. If conventional warriors would learn to have more appreciation, value, and love for those they desire to fight or annihilate, their combative mood would disappear. Now, before we end, any questions, comments? Anybody there?
Yes, there's one person, two people, Bhakti and Jennifer and Virgil.
Oh, Bhakti and Jennifer's there, and who else?
Virgil.
Virgil? Where's Virgil from? Ask. And I'm going to bring this to Carol is gone and Bhuvan Mahan's not there. He's not on tonight. Okay. What have we been talking about? Spiritual warriorship, right? And the weapons and the difference between spiritual warriors and conventional. He tells us that the path of a spiritual warrior is not easy. Now, through these books, the spiritual warrior books, we've been trying to address material, metaphysical, and spiritual concerns to help with the discipline of spiritual warriorship. We want to solve material problems with what? Spiritual solutions. Remember, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, Krishna tells Arjuna his frustration, his dejection, his depression. Remember, he said, I will not fight, I can't. It was because he didn't know the difference between the spiritual and the material. And that's what Bhakti Tirtha Swami is helping us to move through. And as we take on the role of the spiritual warrior and understand the weapons and concepts, then we begin to realize how we are spiritual beings. So he says we want to go beyond the point of just having peace solely for ourselves. Right? We want to help others, not just ourselves. We want to go beyond our own meditation, chanting, praying, yoga, and nutrition. That means we take those things for ourselves. We need them in order to function. But we don't stop there. We also want to go beyond just thinking about change. Becoming active in the role we can play in making what? Making the world a better place. Remember an expression, if it's to be, it's up to me. So naturally, we must work on our own universe first. I think I remembered a line from the Bible. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and all else will follow. And this is what he's saying. We must work on ourselves first. We must work on our own body and consciousness. In this way, we will make a contribution that can influence the bigger universe. The path of the spiritual warrior is not easy. It demands courage, determination, discipline, intense compassion, and unconditional love. Wonderful qualities. And we have them within us. Let's hear that again. This path of the spiritual warrior is not an easy path. Now you've been hearing all along, spiritual warrior. We must be the need for spiritual warriorship. The path demands courage, determination, discipline, intense compassion, and unconditional love. It requires an understanding that this world is not the final chapter. We are on a mission. Spiritual warriors undergo adversity and challenges, however, in a positive and equal state of mind. They see the challenges as purifying and understand how the obstacles does what? The obstacles that, we had so much on that. I keep going back to what we've read. Hopefully you've gotten that. The obstacles force warriors to achieve higher, accelerate faster, and try harder. Even gold, the most valuable and costly of metals, is brought into its glory by what? Intense pressure and heat. Spiritual warriorship is similar. Thus, a spiritual warrior should thrive on intensity. The more our desire to help and make a change flourishes, the more we will want to be a part of the struggle. It's in the ball is in our court. What? The more our desire to what? To help others and to make change. If it's just in our home, in our school, wherever we are, that desire, if we make that have that flourishing in our minds and consciousness, the more we will want to be a part of the struggle. And then he reminds us, spiritual warriors are not alone. They carry the Supreme Lord in their hearts. Now, if you've got the Lord in your heart, what's the fear? I remember in one of the qualities of a spirit, it was fearlessness. And he says, how could a spiritual warrior be intimidated when he's got the Supreme Lord backing him up? And again, we have to become convinced of this. We have to practice it, see it in our daily lives, how we are cared for. He says, the chariots, devas, and angels guard and guide spiritual warriors. And the residents of the spiritual world share them. How's that? The residents of the spiritual world share them as hero and heroines on their journey back home to the transcendental realm. So you're not alone. You're never alone. Through the challenges, the adversities, and because we're in material world, we're going to meet them. But as it says, fearlessly we can do that. So we're going to close, Because he says, just as in conditional warfare, people receive supplies, resources, encouragement, and honor, spiritual warriors are backed up by angelic hosts. Do you want to join the ranks of this transcendental army? If so, you must take a stand, and you must make a choice. Do you want to join the ranks of this transcendental army? So I'm going to close now. We're at the end of this chapter. I just see, let me just close this paragraph because I see something here. I just always want to keep sharing what he's saying. But he reminds us that as the negative forces struggle to maintain their foothold in our lives, only two sides will emerge: the spiritually enlightened and the materially oppressed. He says, beloved, we do not have the luxury of time. Your current thoughts and actions are already placing you in one camp or another. And what are the two camps? The spiritually enlightened and the materially oppressed. Your current thoughts and actions are already placing you in one camp or another. But he also says you must make a choice. The earth is merging into a millennium of spiritual enlightenment and purity. The residents will become conspicuous by their loving natures and peaceful minds. The devas and angels will again visit the planet, and tranquility will permeate throughout the atmosphere. So he invites us to take our place among the inhabitants of the golden age. Pick up your weapons of austerity, mercy, compassion, and love, and join the ranks of the spiritual warriors as we forge a new beginning under the banner of the Supreme Lord. How do you feel about that? Any comment? If you don't have a question, if you've been here with us tonight, do you have a comment before we close? Is there still just two people there? Okay. Any comment from the two wonderful souls who lasted through this night? Who's that? Jennifer and who else?
Virgil.
Virgil. Did Virgil say where?
Fort Pierce, Florida.
Florida. Oh, where's Fort Pierce? Anywhere near Alachua? I'm happy you're there. Thank you. Any comments on what you've heard tonight? Was there any one word, sentence, group of sentences, anything that came across that may help you, or you feel can help you, or you feel you understand, you want to respond to that? No comment? No comment. All right. Thank you for being there.
Bhakti Jennifer says thank you, very nice.
Oh, thank you, Bhakti Jennifer. No comment, no word, no thought.
Virgil says thank you.
Okay. I thank you for your thank you. And I wish you'd just give me a word. But it's okay. The Bhagavad Gita also says you do your best and you don't, become overly concerned for the result. So I thank you that you were there, and hopefully something you heard can help you in your life, and maybe you'll share with me next time. All right. Have a wonderful night and a wonderful week. Hare Krishna.